Yat Eshik Auto Shidane. Welcome to Nihije Podcast, our voices, Indigenous solutions for the world, for our people, for the universe. I'm so happy to be here with Crystal Wahpepah. How are you doing today, sister?
Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness, thank you for having us. We're honestly very honored that you would be here. Crystal has started a kitchen, or rather a beautiful restaurant in Oakland at Fruitvale BART Station in Oakland, California, called Wahpepah's Kitchen. And I have gone there, and I swear to God, it's the most delicious food I've ever eaten. Not even exaggerating. I had venison, meat skewers that were just cooked to perfection. I like kind of just, stalk all of your food on Facebook and look at it and just wish I was in Oakland. But, you've been doing amazing food work for a long time, and we're so happy to have you. And, you're actually I'm going to brag about you for a second. I apologize. But you're actually the first Indigenous chef who appeared on the cooking program Chopped, and you started out running your catering business, which now has turned into this beautiful restaurant. Um, and you have also received the Indigenous Artist Activist Award. You're an enrolled member of the Kickapoo Nation of Oklahoma, but born and raised in Oakland. And you have done incredible things to educate the community, acknowledge we live on stolen land, and reclaim our foods as Indigenous peoples. And you also have been a part of the James Beard Award, which is also amazing. So, anyways, we're just delighted to have you. Could you, if you want, just how would you introduce yourself to the listeners? What would you want people to know about you? How would you introduce yourself?
I introduce myself as Crystal Wahpepah. I'm from Kickapoo tribe of Oklahoma. I'm a Native American chef here in the Bay Area. Um, when it becomes more, when people say you're a chef, what makes you a chef? That's really kind of like a colonized kind of word for chef. I like to actually say more. I love to feed the community. I love to provide foods for the community. So I wish we can say it in that term. What do you do? I like to provide foods to the community and to people. I just love to cook.
Yeah, chef, as others have mentioned, is such a hierarchical term of like, there's the head chef and da 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 da, and he's usually a man, right? And um, whereas I feel like you said, the art of cooking and the art of bringing food to the nation is very much a community effort and very much a effort from the heart. Um, but yeah, no, I've known you for years. You've been my sister for a long time. We've had a lot of good laughs, shared a lot of good times, and I'm just lucky to run into you from time to time at amazing events. A lot of people have followed your work, Wahpepah's Kitchen, online, or even visited your restaurant. Or if you live in the Bay Area, you've probably been catered by, your previous catering business. But I think people might want to know like some of the deeper dimensions of what you do to gain inspiration. So I was just wondering, why do you do what you do, Crystal? Why did you choose this life for yourself?
Mm. Well, I'm a believer that you know when you say choose this life from myself, I believe it actually chose me. I'm very humble and grateful that I have an opportunity to serve the community and be here for the community. I grew up here in Oakland, California. I come from single mother that was Kickapoo, and single mother, like with my grandmother was single, my mother was single, and I come from a lot of lineage of women that were single mothers. And I've been really fortunate to be raised by all these beautiful women here in the Bay Area community. And since day one, pretty much since I've been born, for my grandmother and for my aunties. They all helped raise me with, along, of course, with my mom at the same time of me being biracial. My father's African American, my mother's Native American, which I've never grew up really knowing. My father, just of him, but not really knowing him, and being embraced by a woman of our native culture, and how my grandmother actually came here during she remarried, and actually during the relocation act here in the Bay Area. And my family's very active when it comes into activism within human rights of the community of Native people. And so if I had to ever describe myself, this is something that I was born into, let alone later at an age where I realized me running around, we went to Alcatraz. I listened to different speakers and the front lines of activism speak. And um, I didn't know I had a role at that time. Of course, I was a young girl, but later on, as I grew up, and I realized how protective and how much I love my native people, my native culture, especially when it comes to food. That was something I was drawn to at a very young age. Um, coming from a background of historical trauma, and actually trying to find my way of me being biracial, and me trying to find out who I was. And this is where something I always connected with, and that's with the land. That's with the food. We lived in the Hoopa Reservation, and I would remember going around, running around, getting berries. My auntie would always ask me to grab berries, and I would grab berries, and I would sing to the berries. I would talk to the berries, and I was a little, I guess I was an odd child when you kind of think about it, but then I realize now how life is a circle, how they were really speaking to me, and how when I would, go and kind of harvest my own things I thought was edible when it comes to pine nuts. And I had this relationship with them as I got older, I realized. And so, of me being surrounded by a huge Native community, an Indigenous community that actually embraced my cooking, embraced me, who I was as a person that wanted to provide Native foods.
I'm going to go off script a little bit and ask you a question that we didn't prepare. Just what is one of your favorite dishes to serve to people, and why is it one of your favorites?
Ooh. Well, I just don't have one, but I have a few. So I definitely want to start off with the berries. I love berries. And if you've seen in my dishes, my I have my own little twisted version of how I put berries on a dish, but I find the berries very beautiful, colorful, and it has a deeper story with me when it comes to with the berries. Something where I feel like I have this relationship when it comes with berries, how it speaks to me. And I'm just hoping it would speak to people how it spoke to me.
Are berries sort of like connected to Kickapoo culture? I mean, I'm sure they are, but do you feel like
Yes.
that's part of why they're so deeply
Um,
connected to you?
yes. Well, yes, definitely. Ours would be the blackberry when it comes to Kickapoo culture, but when it comes to just all kind of like different berries, and this is something that I built a relationship with when I was a young girl, that kind of it was my little safe haven, something I really loved, not just to eat, but also to cook. And it also reminds me of my grandfather.
Yeah, I've had your version of what the Lakota call the wojape, and
Yes.
it's delicious, and you do an amazing job with it. And I mean, if you think about it, the berry is such a good metaphor for food, right? Because it's like it's this sweet, beautiful fruit that the creator just made. It's almost like to remind us about the sweetness of life, to remind us, like, I mean, just think about strawberries. Like, if you ever feel down and you're having a bad day, just remember that creator created strawberries, and like they're these red, gorgeous things that just grow out of the earth. And if you're in California, they just grow wild. And I mean, obviously they take care of the strawberry patches, so they weren't wild in that sense, but they just grow. And like it's just a good metaphor for the providence. And not only does creator feed us, but he feeds us, or she feeds us, or whoever it is feeds us in a sweet way.
No, I agree. Um, when it comes in, it just says a lot about what season we're in, how we're feeling. And so I believe berries can tell many stories.
And that's beautiful that, come full circle, right? When you're
Yeah.
you're a little girl singing to the berries, and now they're singing back to you. And so to you, what is the deeper spiritual meaning of being a chef? I know that's a huge question, but is it purely just a career, or is there a spiritual element to it for you?
Um, Definitely more of the spiritual element. And when it comes into career, so you have to, like, when it comes to, especially me being a chef, you have to have a little bit of both. And but at the end of the day, it's about me being a native chef, and I always speak to other chefs about this. To be a native chef, you definitely have to be involved in the community. Community is number one.
Yeah, and like, does prayer or like intention as you're cooking,
Yes.
what does that look like for you?
Well, how I was raised, and we always had our spirituality and our culture of being very mindful when it comes to the foods. And so definitely there's, since I do have a restaurant and we're in a restaurant kind of form, I do have my own spirituality where I come here to the restaurant by myself, where I say little prayers, but also at the same time, with our employees, everybody has their own take on it. And what I mean by that is, I didn't receive. I'm a firm believer where I wouldn't have this place without spirituality. I wouldn't have this place without prayer. So I like to begin the day off like that.
Right. And I think I even visited your restaurant recently, and the whole crew, the whole staff was praying together, before some food was being served. But yeah, so right now, we're in this incredibly exciting time of decolonization, and our messages are getting out there even more as Indigenous people standing on the shoulders of, like you said, the activists you watched growing up. um, what do you feel is like the difference between being an Indigenous chef and being a mainstream chef? Like, do you notice any big differences in those two cultures?
Oh, definitely. A huge difference. It's about what I mentioned before about community, about connecting, about our foods, how sacred our foods are, and how our foods are coming within our communities, who grows our foods. Everything is a certain protocol when it comes to our foods, and how how we serve these foods. And when it becoming a native chef, it's definitely, it takes a little bit more, one, to educate ourselves where our food comes from. And I always talk about, we can start off with our own tribe, but if you're not raised around your tribe, it's always good to meet people within, your tribe, or just when it comes, because with our food has different, especially Wahpepah's kitchen, we have intertribal foods. And so we have different intertribal foods. and when it comes with it, it's just pretty, you have to educate yourself where they come from, um, where you're getting your foods and why you're serving it. And to be a indigenous chef, it takes it's a lot of responsibility, however how you look at it, but then it's also an honor when you have different tribes or different people come and they want to grow foods for you. That's a huge, huge honor. That means you get the opportunity to provide for your community and to cook for your community. That's the difference between being a chef or native chef. um, it's on hands of working within your community.
Right, right. Being enmeshed in a larger web of relationships that are about honor and generosity and humility. So speaking of that, like, do you have any stories of like someone who was growing food or even hunting food that brought food to your kitchen? Do you like how, because I always think about supply chain, right? Which is such a colonial term.
Yes.
Supply chain, it sounds weird. It's like it's taking life and turning it into like this chain of slavery of just like, you know, in enslaving pigs and cows, and they're just a supply. But anyway, is there any like way that you supply your ingredients that is it done in community or indigenously?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the number one things that we do. When it comes into we collaborate with like Culture Conservancy. They grow our foods for us, and then we also collaborate with different BIPOC farms. When it comes to that, like we're like I guess what was the term would be, we're more like into grassroots, I guess, so to speak, when you want to talk about foods. But
Yeah.
this is something when it comes to being a native chef. This is another responsibility that we take up on, where we source our foods, where it comes from. Like I'm part of the American Indian Foods Program. That's where I get the opportunity to collaborate and meet different Native American food producers all throughout the nation. But when it comes locally, this is where I collaborate with native farms. Um, like for instance, we practice native food ways within the restaurant. I do have my staff um, participate in native food ways. We walk around, educate each other upon where the seeds come from, where they come from, what they're serving. And this is where I had a huge opportunity to grow the Buffalo Creek squash, for instance. And I wanted just to extend an invitation out to my employees saying, I'm going to be here at 10 o'clock. We're going to have 2 cars. So if anybody want to come to help plant these seeds at the farm and meet the people that are actually caretakers of our foods, you're more than welcome to come. I was kind of blown away. All my staff came, and I have staff of 15. We represent 17 tribes, and they all came. My heart was touched. So we got to go travel and go get these seeds and plant them. But at the same time, we all stand in a circle and had a few words to say. And this is when I pretty much knew what transition and what we are in when it comes into food sovereignty, when it comes into placing these seeds into the ground. And I actually took my staff to actually help harvest these squash. And there's no words can describe of seeing your staff actually cutting the squash, serving the squash, telling the customers about the squash. And then from there, we keep the seeds and we give the seeds back.
Whoa, that is like phenomenal. I mean, it's just like I remember one time I found a fresh duck who had just recently got caught in like the fence on the river. This was in Alabama. And we harvested it and ate it. And there was something so like something so deeply moving to me. I started crying, like, because how rare is it that we get to eat straight from the source, straight from the earth?
Mhm.
And I know that sounds like a silly story, but like it was just so profound. And it was like a healing thing, because the food system has robbed us of that. And the American culture has made our connection to our food 3 to 4 to 5 degrees removed before it ever gets to us. We don't know where it came from. We don't know where it was planted. We don't know the water that watered it. And so I think I can understand what you're saying, that nothing could describe the feeling of seeing your employees like plant the squash, harvest the squash, cut the squash, serve the squash. Like I can totally get like understand that feeling of just being human again, maybe, and just what it would be like if we could all be more connected to our foods. Do you have any hunters? Like, do you have any folks who hunt?
Yes, yes, I do. I have actually I have a few hunters, which in Indian way I call them my brothers, and then this is here, of course, here in the Bay. But when it comes to having hunters within the restaurant, this is where I pull out my sources when, we source from Cheyenne River, things like that. But when I have special requests, like of catering, cooking for the community, that's when I pull out my hunter's card.
What type of things have they hunted for you?
Definitely deer. Definitely some deer, wild turkeys. When it comes into it, all kind of depends what the purpose is.
Yeah.
So all at the same time, I have a really good brother that I know where his heart is. He's one of my prayer brothers, and he goes out there, and when it's time to hunt, he'll go hunt. But at the same time, we kind of utilize that very wisely. But then when I go back home to Oklahoma, of course, I come from a family of hunters, and so that's where I grew up. My grandfather was a hunter, so I respect those protocols of hunting.
That is so cool. I remember like maybe, gosh, almost 10 years ago now. I had a dream of a food truck, and I was like really wanting to bring hunters in and farmers and really practice bringing, like, reinventing the quote unquote supply chain so that we're actually in relationship with the earth and the seasons and things like that. So just
Mhm.
to see you doing it in real life is so cool and so beautiful and so powerful. And I hope other chefs listening or anyone listening, is inspired by this and applies it to their life. However it makes sense to do that. In your restaurant, which again is in Oakland, California, Fruitvale BART Station, it's the most delicious experience you'll ever have. Definitely go check it out. But in the restaurant, you have a mural, and it says something about food warriors. What does it say?
It says Indigenous food warriors.
Yes, Indigenous food warriors. Okay, so what does it mean to be an Indigenous food warrior? Like, what is our work right now? What is our goal? Like, what needs to be done as a food warrior? Like, what is that agenda from your perspective as a food warrior? What are we trying to do here?
Um, Well, definitely, this is where the indigenous food sovereignty takes place, and this is where we, as an indigenous food warrior, we have a duty, and that is protect, to serve when it comes to one our community, and we all have different places, especially in the restaurant. Like for instance, when we talk about indigenous food warrior, it's something with our farmers, our our hunters, our seed keepers, all the way up into our water protectors. We all that participate into the food, our food sovereignty. And I stress that a lot because at the same time, one of my servers, which is my daughter, I told her, "You're an Indigenous food warrior." And she said, "How's that, Mom? I don't cook." Well, you serve. We all have have a duty when we serve, one, our community, two, all the way up until my prep cooks, up to my chefs, all the way up to our dishwashers. We all are participating into protecting and serving.
Yeah, and I like how you said all the way up to our dishwashers.
Yeah.
In a regular restaurant, they'd say all the way down to our dishwashers.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
but like those sometimes the most humble jobs, like dishwashing, are the most meaningful.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's another difference between indigenous foodways and mainstream chef stuff, is that these quote unquote small jobs are done knowing that it creates a difference, and that it is actually a vital part of, and that dishwashers are honored, like you just honored the dishwashers. And so like, and that's not a small job, it's like a really important one. Because
Yeah.
without it, there would be no dishes. Like every
Yes.
element counts.
And I'm finding out, and just within the restaurant, with even when I would cater, dishwasher is very important. Dishwasher is actually any position for me personally. That's the one that's humble. That person is humble because, one, it kind of holds our place, and it holds the restaurant all together.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a quick story that a Lakota woman told me. She said, there was once a warrior who was always, fixing his hair and greasing his hair back, um, and his hair was, flashy and handsome, and had the bear grease going, and he's just, really handsome. But his feet, he'd always neglect his feet. He didn't, because nobody saw them and they were unimportant or something. And then once, like I forget, it was like a battle or something happened, and his feet wouldn't go. And he said, "What are you doing, feet?" And they said, "Well, you don't pay attention to us. You neglect us." And it's like, it's not a English story. It might be like stuff lost in translation, but to me, it just means to never forget about the things that make everything move. Like your feet. And so to always take care of those things that might not have the flashy, head chef on the front page of whatever, but it's like the feet, the parts, the things that make stuff go forward, and to be humble and to honor those things. So I appreciate that.
Mhm.
So, and I love your description of an indigenous food warrior. I think we're all, like that. When we're involved in foods, and I really encourage non-native listeners too to embrace this warrior spirit, because although indigenous peoples have kind of championed it and lived it, it really is for every single living being to be a warrior, and to apply this to your life, no matter what you do. To be a warrior is to be in service to something, and it's not about war. It's, despite the name, it's actually about peace. It's actually about health and harmony, and maintaining balance in the ecosystem, in the community. And so I just really encourage you to remember, whoever you are, that you are a warrior too. It's just whether or not we step into that role or not. And I think life is asking us to do that. So, um, there's this really cool Afro-Indigenous pride movement bubbling up right now. And you do not have to answer this question if you want to pass, because I know it's like not on the questions list. But I'm just wondering, like, when you were younger, did that exist? And like, how does that feel for you, being, like you said, biracial, and having that? I'm biracial as well, but I'm half white, half native. So that's its other set can of worms, right? But I know what you mean, where it kind of creates a little bit of a puzzle you have to figure out, of like, who am I? What am I doing? How do I exist here? But like, what do you think about this Afro-Indigenous movement, which I personally am so excited that it's finally popping off the way it should have a long time ago. Was it there when you were younger? What do you think about it now?
Um, I love that question. I'm gonna say, yes, it was. One, I've been really fortunate, just to grow up here in the Bay Area. When I would go and kind of like go to Oklahoma, or go on the outsides of not being here in Oakland, you didn't see it. Um, when it comes to more, I see more when it comes to Afro-Indigenous, and more pride, more strength, especially I me growing up, I was rare, very rare of me seeing somebody that was mixed like me. Um, but when we do see each other, you know, it was, like, oh wow. I'm seeing a lot more, especially probably I'm gonna say within the maybe 10 years, I see a lot more um of strong, beautiful, loving, colorful sisters coming out. And me, when I'm doing the work that I'm doing, I just have a certain mindset that I do, and it's just to embrace one, our cultural and our foods, but at the same time, when you have a lot of different indigenous Afro women coming up to you and saying how they've been following you and how they watch you, and what you've been doing. And that is something where how life is a circle again comes back around, and it really touches my heart. And I have, for me being you know, and with the mixed race, you try not to put that responsibility on yourself, but you do have that responsibility because what you represent. And me growing up and telling people I want to be a native chef, and they probably don't see me being native, but then me, within the African American culture, and telling them that I'm Native American, or I'm Black, kind of goes back and forth. So I really had to grow up, and I really had to find out who I was. And on that part where I was embraced when it comes to my uncle Bill Wahpepah, he actually, I was crying one day, and he actually pulled me aside, and he goes, "What are you crying for?" And then I said, "Oh, well, that person called me a name." And I didn't really realize how mixed I was until when other people would call me different names. And he told me to stop crying, and he actually um told me about Alice Walker. And he had me read her books of Alice Walker, and I learned at a very young age how to be prideful of who I am and where I come from. I come from of culture of strength, when it comes from indigenous warriors, and when it comes from overcoming when it comes from Africa. And I learned how to embrace those two cultures, and it made me who I was, and that's where the strengths come from. And I'm very proud of where I come from and who I am.
Yes, absolutely. And Alice Walker is author of The Color Purple, and just an incredible novelist, of African American descent, Black descent. And it's just very quite beautiful that, you were able to see the gorgeousness of the hybridity of these two rivers coming together to make you who you are.
Mhm.
And we need all of that, and how beautiful it is that, because the word indigenous, we often apply it to us here in Turtle Island, but we're all indigenous to somewhere. And even though I always point out that doesn't mean we're all indigenous to the land we're standing on, and that's important. But the indigenous ancestors on your African lineage, gosh, they had so much food culture too that I'm sure
Mhm.
is working through you, and like informing your dishes, and like inspiring you in ways that might not even be able to be described. And so it's all there with us, right? So
Yes.
and it's and it makes us stronger, to have these different influences. But yeah, no, I love it. And I love that this I just want, like, our folks who have a more melanation, they look more Black, like
Mhm.
that's so much harder sometimes for them to claim to be native, than, for instance, someone like me who's half white. Because for some weird reason, if you're Black, you can't be Native in a lot of people's minds. It's like,
Mhm.
and it's just obviously like doesn't make any sense. But if you're a little bit lighter skinned like me, like, oh, okay, you're part Native, you know. But it's like it's such a anti-Black bunch of BS that we need to like really deconstruct, even in our own Native communities, you know, where it's like, oh, like if you go to the Northeast, like the Lenape Nation or the Narragansett Nation, a lot of folks like they look Black, you know, and
Yes.
it's like, look, we got to honor these relatives because they're sometimes the only ones carrying the torch forward. And they're the only ones left after attempted genocide. So why would we try to take away their Indigenous identity when
Mhm.
these are the living descendants of these nations that were almost wiped out? Like, and they're honoring it, they're claiming it, they're carrying it. So I just want to do my little plug to anyone Afro-Indigenous out there. I see you, I love you. Keep walking forward, keep honoring who you are, and let's just keep doing the thing. So yeah, anyways, did you want to respond to that, or should I ask you maybe
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yes, and it's even more now. Just empowering each other and supporting each other, and of me just coming from a mixed race, me knowing it wasn't easy, and at the same time within that strength of supporting one another. And I love seeing beautiful women, not just women but also men coming out there and doing things and representing of who they are, and being secure and knowing where they come from, who they are, and where they're going. Those are the number one things that is and just be happy where we come from. And it's it could be a struggle if you let it be a struggle, but if you see people more just like myself coming out, and different people representing and what they're doing. I always explain, when I make a plate, this is who I am on the plate, and this is what you see. um
Mm,
and so, I got asked different kind of questions of me being a Native American chef, but then they probably maybe see Black, even from, even when it comes from in my own home, um, this is who I am. And I learned how I was very, very fortunate to come from a family that embraced that, and to tell me, stop crying. You are who you are, and be happy of who you are. And that was instilled in me at a very young age. Even at the same time, I kind of grew up a little, just a little like who I am, just because I didn't grow up, with my father's side, and I
mm-hmm.
didn't grow up on that side, but and it was always kind of how I was embraced just by my native side and being who I am. So when you see something on the plate, this is who I am.
It's
And
so beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it just goes to show how important it is to know our roots.
Hmm.
If we have this hard of a time, then and that's why I think a lot of Euro Americans are struggling of like, well, what the heck am I? Who am I? Is my culture just Coca-Cola and Walmart and like, you know, 1776 and the founding fathers? Is this my ethnicity? It's like that's not an ethnicity. That's not an ancestral lineage. That's a nationalist construct, and so I think no matter who you are in this continent, literally Asian, Indigenous, Black, European, like we're all have a little bit of an identity crisis going on. I'm like, who am I? But I love how you took the bull by the horns and you're like, you know what? I have this medicine. My mother passed it down to me. And I have these foods that have come into, like you said, they chose you to be their ambassador. And you said, okay, I'll do it. You took up that mantle and you said, all right, I'm going to do this. And I think that's inspiring and really encourages each of us to, when our gifts come at knocking at our door and saying, hey, will you be our ambassador? To really follow Crystal's example, and take that up and say, yes, I will serve you. I will, like in your case, literally you're serving these foods to the people, and you're serving these foods in your life. And so just thank you for being what you are, and doing it so sweetly. If you know Crystal behind the scenes, she's a really silly, fun, humorous person. And I think that goes along with the berries metaphor, like you feed the people, but you do it so sweetly. And I just can't thank you enough for being who you are.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll end on this question. What can we as everyday citizens do to further the work of being an Indigenous food warrior?
Oh, always feed your community. If you're not, you don't have to be a chef or a cook, but always participate into something that has to do with lending a helping hand, all the way up into, like, if you, for instance, there's a gardener, if you want to help garden, or if you want to help just make this world a better place. And that's, for me personally, that is to feed a community member and to become a better citizen. For instance, during the COVID, I always took it upon myself to think of an elder, and and who can I make this chicken and dumpling soup for? Who can I, there's always somebody out there that needs to eat and wants to eat. But then when it comes to having different elders, and you can actually provide some traditional foods of the cultural, that is right there. That's there's no word can describe that. Because at the same time, everybody needs that connection, especially when it comes to food and culture. Everybody needs that connection where we can break bread with one another. But most of all, where our food comes from and what land it comes from.
Yes, so beautiful. And I think no matter who we are, where we're from, we're going to have to come to terms and reckon with our food in a deep way in the coming decades as these food systems collapse. Monoculture only exists because we pump these things full of antibiotics and pesticides and herbicides, because it's actually not natural to have 20 acres of just corn, or just soybeans, or just rice, or just cows. That's actually not Creator's way. In Dene language, we call it aftas-e, which means diversity, many different things existing at once. And that biodiversity is Creator's way, or creation's way. And so when we create these artificial systems where it's just one thing, which is what most of our food comes from, we have to uphold that artificiality through these safety measures like pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, and we keep all these pests at bay, because quote unquote pests, because if even one virus can hack that cow genome, or if one pest can hack that corn genome, then they can eat the whole thing and they wipe it out. Whereas if it's biodiverse, that one pest can't figure out a juniper tree, a pinon tree, and the 20 different types of grasses growing on. You can't eat it all. So it's sort of biodiversity protects from something ripping through it and wiping it out. So we're building these super pests. As we have our pesticides, they're growing stronger. They're learning how to get past our defense mechanisms, and we're running out of bullets. Even agricultural scientists will tell you today, we are not able to outrun these pests anymore. We're not able to outrun these viruses, these illnesses that are getting into the cows and the chickens. We're seeing the price of eggs. That's exactly because these chickens are getting ripped through. And so we are due, the clock is set for a pretty intense food collapse in the very near future. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that, but that's the truth. So we are all indebted to people like Crystal, who are working to build these alternative systems so that when the shit does hit the fan, excuse my language, we have something to fall back on. And I really deeply encourage each of us to start building those local food infrastructures. It's no joke. This is reality. So thank you for your time, sister. Any last things you'd like to say before I let you get on to your beautiful, busy day and all the wonderful work that I'm sure you're going to be doing today?
Uh, No, no, it was such an honor being on here with you. And of course, I love you. I support you and all the beautiful work. And I love the last words that you had said, especially when it comes to our foods, when our food system. We cannot rely when it comes to corporate companies. We cannot rely when it comes to the corner stores that we do see when it comes into foods. It's about reclaiming and taking our foods. If you have an opportunity to work at a garden, I highly recommend it. And to understand this, I'm not going to call it a craft, but these are the original ways. This is where I have my three daughters. They work here in the restaurant, but at the same time, I'm teaching them how to keep seeds. I'm teaching them how to further this for the future generation.
Beautiful. And we're all so lucky that you do. Thank you so much for your time, dear sister. And have a beautiful day today. And all of you listening, have a beautiful day as well. Thank you very much.